conversation explores the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest, the identity doctor, helping align who you are with you or with how you show up. One of his advocacy, none other than Mr. Douglas McCall. Welcome, Mr. Douglas on Abstract Essay. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I missed?
Sure thing. My name is Dr. Douglas McCall, clinically identified. I have been working in the field of education for most of my career. I've worked with students ranging in ages from middle school students, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, all the way through college students and adult students. In the last 10 years, I've spent digging deep into the idea of identity and about who we are and how we show up and the things that we do. And it started off for me as a conversation with a student teacher once who was having trouble developing their teacher identity. And it got me digging into research that showed that many teachers, over in the United States anyway, over 50% of teachers leave the field within the first 5 years. And I looked at that and said, that's a startling statistic. Why is that happening? And as it turns out, there's some fundamental things that happen that teachers get out of their undergraduate ready to teach, but not really comfortable in their teacher identity. And because they're not comfortable in that teacher identity, the work that they do stresses them out and it burns them out and it burns them out fast because they weren't doing what they thought they were going to be doing. And as I've explored this topic more and more, it cuts across all areas. I came into it from an education space, but it doesn't matter whether you're a teacher or an engineer or a podcast host. If your identity doesn't jive with what you do every single day, then it gets stressful and it can burn you out. So I want to help folks to understand who they are and make sure that the stuff that they spend their day doing fits in with who they are.
Very well said, Mr. Douglas. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Thank you. So, are you a podcast host as well?
I am not. That was aiming right at you, Daniel, make sure that you are aligned with who you want to be.
Okay, that'd be awesome. So you open your series by stating identity has a profound impact on life and career satisfaction. For someone who has never considered their identity as something separate from their resume or their roles, where would they begin that conversation?
Well, identity, and certainly your resume speaks to a lot of the pieces of your identity. But resume, no matter how you look at it, is just a list of things that you've done in your lifetime, and that doesn't necessarily speak to your identity. Your identity is somewhat defined by how you look, which is what it is. Your identity is defined by the different circles that you walk in, and these can be circles of culture. These can be circles of things you choose to be a part of. For example, I happen to be a church going individual. That's part of my identity. It's part of who I understand myself to be. And how might that express itself or be challenged in the workplace? Well, if I work in a job or do a thing that doesn't espouse religion, or my religion, then I might feel challenged by that. So that identity fits in there. Identity is part of the social groups you decide to be in. If you hang out, if you identify as someone who likes to watch horseback riding, that's part of your identity. It's part of what fills you. So identity is these pieces that cut across everything that you do. It has to do with your morals, it has to do with your beliefs. All of these things are so much deeper than just the things that we do every day. I spent a whole summer working at McDonald's flipping burgers. I did not want to be at McDonald's flipping burgers. I don't identify as a food service worker. coworker, but it was a job that I did. As a result, that was challenging for me because it had nothing to do with what I truly wanted to be doing. So at the end of every day, I was drained, I was exhausted, and I was literally just standing at a cook plate flipping burgers. It shouldn't have been all that hard, but the identity piece is such a big part of it, and we want to make sure that we know what that is. And so it's asking yourself, what are the things that are really important to you? What are the things that speak to you? What are the things that matter to you? At the end of the day, what are the things that you do that fill you, that make you joyful and happy? And also knowing what are the things that take you in the other direction. If you know that doing this thing makes you drained and makes you sad or pick an emotion, a negative emotion, then that's important to understand as well. Again, so far beyond the resume. I mean, I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher for a long time. And I love many, many aspects of teaching. But there are lots of aspects of teaching that have nothing to do with working with students that I don't love, that drain me. And so the resume doesn't capture that either. It's important to understand that whatever you're doing, you have to understand the pieces of it that will fill you and the pieces of it that won't. Because no activity that you engage in is going to 100% fill you or 100% drain you. It's always going to be a mixture of those. And the things that are fulfilling to you are the things that fulfill you more than they drain you. And again, that's understanding you and what makes you tick and makes you what motivates you to do things.
Mr. Douglas, your work focuses on the idea that who you are matters more than what you do. Can you share a personal moment from your own life, a career where you realized that your identity, not your actions, was the real driver of your fulfillment or lack therefore?
Sure, it's a that's a great question. And one of the reasons that I focus some of my work, a fair amount of it on college students. When I was little, um, under 18, I was a really, really good performer, music, singer, actor, doing things like that on stage. And I adored doing that stuff. I got to be in high school, later high school, and my mother, the most well-meaning one woman I've ever met, suggested to me, mostly because she wanted me to have income when I got out of college, said, "Have you considered teaching?" And she's like, "You're really good with people, and you have a natural bend for that." And so I ended up going on and said, that's not a bad idea. And so I went on and I got a degree in teaching and I got another degree in teaching. And I let that performer piece of me kind of walk to the wayside. And I did teaching for a long, long time. And I talked about myself as a teacher. I always self-effaced to a lot of points. When my students had a good performance, I taught music. When we sang a good concert, and parents came and talked to me afterwards and said, "Wow, you guys did a really nice job." I said, "Oh yes, but it was all the students." So I was very much student driven, and that's what you're supposed to be as a teacher. It was very, very student driven. But in that process of lifting up my students, I didn't acknowledge myself as a performer on the stage. And so I spent 20 years of my career trying not to be a performer on a stage, but being a teacher. When my identity, when I look to myself, that being up on a stage, talking, performing in front of people, that's that's really important to my identity. That's something that fulfills me. And as I push that further and further down, I became more and more challenged by being in the classroom. When I shifted from one grade level to another, I thought, oh, I'm working with high school kids now. I'll feel better about that. But I would continue to push my identity down and keep lifting the students up, and rightfully so. It wasn't until about 10 years ago that I really started to take a look and realize that pardon me, that excuse me, that the part of me that was back there and being ignored was slowly draining my enjoyment of the thing that I was doing, and that I needed to attend to that. I needed to speak more to that performer identity. And that was where, 10 years or so ago, I found public speaking and present and presenting as a new vehicle, which is really just teaching for a different audience. But oftentimes as a professional speaker, you're the one person on the stage in the front of the room doing that thing much less than you are as a teacher. As a teacher, it's a much more cooperative experience. And then I still get to attend to that teacher part of me because I do enjoy helping people learn as best I can. So that was from an identity point, it was only when I started to honor both pieces of my identity that I started to figure out where I needed to be. And I think for all of us, sometimes we take a job because it's a job and we don't necessarily think about how it will fulfill us long term. And that was what I did. It took me 20 years to figure that out. My hope is to help other folks not take the 20 years that it took me and maybe find that piece of their journey a little sooner.
Very well said, Mr. Douglas. You referenced Stephen Covey's quote, "I'm not a product of my circumstances, I'm a product of my decisions." How does internalizing that belief fundamentally reshape someone's leadership capacity?
Sure, it's that's this idea. I'm not a product of my circumstances, but my decisions. It's so much a part of leadership. In fact, I think that leadership is built on the fact that we realize that we do make decisions, even incredibly small decisions, have an impact on how we move forward. And it's recognizing to say that I am a product of my circumstances is letting the world take control of whatever the situation happens to be. Oh, I can't do this because such and such happened in the world and it's preventing me from doing that. Well, the reality is that every time something happens to you, you always have a decision, even if that decision is in how you react internally, emotionally. Bad things happen to all of us, and sometimes we can't control the bad things that happen. But the reality is that we do have control over how we respond to whatever the bad thing happens. Well, in leadership, whether it's corporate leadership or it's community leadership or it's family leadership, stuff is going to happen. And when that stuff happens, you have the choice on how you react. And how you react will dictate what happens next. If, for example, I have two lovely children, if one of my children happens to wreck my car, which has happened, I have a choice. I can be angry about them wrecking the car, which serves no one except to create anger. Or we can decide in that moment how we are going to move forward and how we are going to navigate that situation. I think that good leaders, effective leaders, are always looking towards what decision can I make that's going to make whatever this situation is better. The leaders who choose to say, "Oh, this thing happened. It's not my fault that this happened. It was circumstances." That denotes weaker leadership, and it's someone who's not willing to take the situation and move to where it needs to be. And so that's I believe we all need to remember that in every situation we always have the ability to make decisions. We have that control. It's never taken from us at any point. We always have decision power.
Very well said, Mr. Douglas. You've introduced concepts like locus of control, self efficacy, and resilience. How do these psychological frameworks connect to the practical challenge of leading terms and organizations?
Sure. Of the three that you listed, self-efficacy is absolutely my preferred one, and I say that simply because my dissertation was 100% focused on the concept of self-efficacy, which was a concept that Albert Bandura came up with in the 1970s. I'm not going to bore you or your audience with the research background. I have 200 pages in a lovely book no one's read that you can absolutely check out um, on self efficacy. But the deal is, self efficacy is the belief that you can do something. It doesn't matter. It's not about. It's not necessarily about ability. It's not. It's not any of those things. Self efficacy says, "I think that I can do this thing." Now, it's influenced by our abilities. It's influenced by what others say about us. It's influenced by the thought that you see someone else do and you go, huh, I can do that. That's self efficacy. The issue, what self efficacy is when times get hard, we will keep working if our self efficacy is high. When something gets challenging, if our self efficacy is low, we'll tend to run the other direction and give up on it. From a leadership standpoint, self efficacy is this belief that you can be a leader, you can do the leadership tasks, but it's also can be transmitted to your team as far as belief that they can do the tasks. Because one of the pieces of self efficacy is absolutely support of others. When you look at someone else and say, you can do that thing, you help to build their self efficacy. So, as a leader, it starts from your own self efficacy. I believe I can do this. I believe my team can do this. I believe that those are all the self efficacy pieces. Then it's translating that to your team and suggesting to them that I believe that we can do this thing. Here are the supports that I can put in place, but I believe that as a team, we can achieve this. So self efficacy weaves through all of that. It starts internally, but can be weaved to efficacy of the entire team. And it has everything to do with motivation. We've all been on a team where we've had a leader who didn't think we could do whatever it is we were setting out to do. And it makes it harder to do it. Lord knows I've been on enough teams where we've had that mindset. But the leader changes their mindset from we can't do this to we can do this. And all of a sudden, it lifts up the entire team. Even if I'm not sure of myself, if the leader's got faith that we can do this thing, that makes a huge difference in success. So I think as leaders, we always want to be checking our own self efficacy and how we're translating that to our team.
Good, indeed, empowering answer, Mr. Douglas. You talk about common barriers like fear, procrastination, and lack of clarity. How does a leader distinguish between a practical obstacle and identity based on why does this distinction matter?
There's a distinction between an identity based and an actual one. Sure.
Yes, please.
Pardon me. I don't know what's going on with my dry throat, apparently. I apologize.
No worries. No worries at all, Mr. Douglas.
So, actually, I mean, so the difference between identity based barriers and actual based barriers comes down to what the leader then has to react with. If it's an actual like a legitimate barrier, then the leader's role at that point is to reduce the barrier, whatever that barrier happens to be. If it's financial, if it's people power, if it's systems or policy, that those are real things. No matter no matter of I think I can necessarily get you past an actual physical barrier or a systemic barrier. So that's where the leader comes in there. But I think those are far fewer. I think the bigger ones is realizing when the reason that your team is struggling is because of a belief system or an identity system. And at that point, it really becomes the leader's job to identify first of all where this identity barrier is coming from. How why is the team or individual feel that they can't do this thing? What's standing in their way? And then oftentimes it comes down to coaching at that point. It's talking them through those issues, those problems, whatever their struggle is. If it's a belief that they lack the capacity to do it, it's showing them the places where they have succeeded, showing them evidence that they can do that thing, that they have done that thing, and that these are the supports that they have. Those things can all be coached through. Sometimes it's individual. It may not be every member of your team has that belief. It may be one person on your team feels that way. So individual coaching. And let's face it, if you're a leader, coaching is a big piece of what you do. Good, effective leaders, I hesitate to use the words good and bad, but effective leaders um, are able to guide their team to do what the team needs to do. Um, so coaching is a big piece of what they do, and it's helping them see their own strengths, also acknowledging their areas of growth and how their strengths can supplement their areas of growth. And then in putting together a team where the strengths of each team member support the areas of growth for each team member. There's pardon me, educational psychologist Lev Vygotsky, who talks about it's called the zone of proximal development, and basically it talks about this idea of is several circles. The interior circle is things that I can do by myself. Then way out here, there's things I can't do. Well, in between those is a circle of things I can do with help, and that's the zone of proximal development. We don't want to always do things that don't challenge us in any way. A good leader will look at the inner circle of his or her entire team and say, okay, this is everybody's skill set. How do we use everybody's skill set to go from here to here, because our circles are all slightly different and we can pull that way. So I think that's another piece of how we get past some of these barriers is by realizing how individual strengths are going to pull the team in the direction that they need to go.
Very well said, Mr. Douglas. And to wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in sixth season, abstract poetry in third season, and my book one, my review in sixth season as well, comedy 101 in fourth season, and food 101 in sixth season as well, geography 101, love letters, movie 101 review, music 101 are fifth season, science 101, sex 101 are in fourth season, and my trivia and my baby podcast trivia 101, motivation 101, spiritual awakening 101, entrepreneurship 101, law 101, mental health 101, as well as my coaching 101 and Bible verses 101. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Douglas, if a leader listening right now and sense that they have been performing from a place of misalignment, doing all the right things but feeling empty, what is one question you would want them to sit with tomorrow morning as they begin their own identity evolution?
Well, first of all, the fact that they are feeling misaligned is a great first step in and of itself. Oftentimes, we don't even realize that we're misaligned. So the fact that we're feeling it is excellent. And then I would say in that first day, those first moments, what you want to do is to sit with, maybe journal or spree write or draw, and start to identify where you're feeling that misalignment. Dig deeper, find its locus so you can start to deal with it at the center level of what you need to know. So find that space, dig deep.
Find the space, people, and well, share it to the world. Your identity, build your legacy. So, Mr. Douglas, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your business, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Sure. Right now, I'm focusing on my coaching work primarily and then public speaking. So go to my website, which is right up there. And if you go to the front page, theidentitydoctor.com, there is a 5C assessment that'll help you start to understand where you're showing up as a leader. And then from there, let's have a conversation about how you can get better aligned.
Certainly, people, let's support Mr. Douglas McCall, because if you support him, for sure, more and more identity will reveal. So, Mr. Douglas, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
Monica, people, see you soon.